Let's get it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach, SchuZ Shoemaker. All right, we got a lot to get into today. Massive fight went down in the early hours of this morning. I'm going to be breaking that all down. But to give a quick outline of the show, what I'm going to be getting into today will be, of course, the Brian Norman Jr. and Jin Sasaki fight card. We're breaking all that down for you guys. Then we're getting into some boxing news as well. As for those that were going to tune in for the Jake Wiley interview, that's going to come up later at another date. We got to postpone that interview for a later date. So that will happen later on. But let's get right into this. And also, while I'm at it, if there's any comments, any questions, any topics you guys want me to discuss on today's show, make sure to leave that in the chat, and I'll make sure to address that as I go throughout the duration of today's show. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Early hours today, Brian Norman Jr. went out to defend his WBO welterweight title belt against Jin Sasaki in Japan. There was a lot of controversy if we go back in time about whether or not he took the right fight for this next opportunity for himself. And there was a lot of debate. Obviously, we had the Boots fight possibly on the table there. We've had other fights in the past. But he decided to go out to Japan and fight Jin Sasaki. And there was a rightful amount of criticism in regards to that decision. What I will say at this point in time is that he made the right choice. As a boxing fan, would I have loved to have seen Boots versus Brian Norman Jr.? Absolutely. But what I think we saw last night, or the early hours of this morning, was a statement moment. What happened out in Japan for Brian Norman Jr. is one of those moments that gets your career into stardom. I wouldn't say he's a superstar in boxing yet, but this is one of those moments that bolster your career, bolster your resume, your highlight reel, and puts your name up amongst, the rising stars of the sport. That was a signature moment. And might I even add this? He got paid quite handsomely to go out there and take this fight as well. This was not a one-off situation where he's barely getting paid. No, he went out to Japan, got paid handsomely, bolstered his name drastically, and has now set himself in a position where he is now one of the bigger stars, you could say, in the welterweight division. I don't think he's officially a certified, superstar in boxing, but he is well on his way to being that because of what happened in the early hours of this morning. Let's break down the fight real quickly. Brian Norman Jr. did retain his WBO belt with a devastating fifth-round TKO of Jin Sasaki. He dropped Sasaki twice in the opening round, first with a counter left hook, then with a three-punch combination. Sasaki did show great heart, obviously kept getting back up, he returned, so on and so forth. That's what Jin Sasaki went out there and did, and he showed great heart. But I'm going to stop there real quickly. I want to add this. Jin Sasaki is a warrior. He went out there and was not going to give in, was not going to throw the white towel, none of those things. He was going to fight until, well, inevitably, what happened in that fifth round. And that's why I will always go back to this. When you talk about boxers, oftentimes the boxers should, if they are going to be successful, have the mentality that they're not going to give out, that they're going to go out on the shield. That is why it is of the corner and the ref's responsibility to save a fighter from long-term damage. And I believe that when we revisit the situation right now, the corner specifically of Jin Sasaki did not have his future in store. They were not worried or concerned about that, and I feel like that caused him legitimate damage now. And here's the reason I'll say this. The details have now come out, and I'm just going to read the exact report right now for you guys. Jin Sasaki does not remember anything that happened in the last 6 weeks of his life after waking up from his KO loss to Brian Norman Jr. this morning. It remains to be seen also whether or not Sasaki will be the same fighter in his entire career. This is a man that does not remember anything that occurred to him in his life over the duration of the past 6 weeks of his life. That's scary stuff. And that's why I will always say you do not play boxing. Oftentimes when you talk about combat sports, I feel like it's universally agreed that obviously, MMA, boxing, so on and so forth are some of the most dangerous sports. The thing about MMA is that oftentimes you will see a situation unfold and it's going to look more gruesome from the outside. The damage in boxing is typically done internally, within the brain, and the damage done there. And what we witnessed last night, or the early hours of this morning, was a man that probably should have had the fight called off in the first round. You got dropped 2 times. You were not looking very good. It was not a competitive fight. And then you continue to go on and you're getting your butt destroyed every single round. Now, he did have a couple moments where he started to turn the tide. Even in round 5 and round 4, he looked a little bit better. But Brian Norman Jr. was still easily winning those rounds. But as the corner, your responsibility is to look out for your fighter. Let him live to fight another day. And we're in a position today where I can honestly look at the situation. I do not know if he's going to be able to live to fight another day. I hope he is. But we're talking about a man that we already ruled out that he does not remember anything that happened in the past 6 weeks of his life. He had a devastating KO. that unfortunately, I pray that is not a situation where he's not going to be able to recover or so on and so forth. But those are the type of things that have long-term damage. That is one of the most brutal knockouts that I've witnessed. It is without a shadow of a doubt the KO of the year. It is without a shadow of a doubt going to be one of the best KOs of this decade, and so on and so forth. That's a signature highlight reel level knockout that has legitimate damage that comes alongside it. And if you look at the situation, there's a lot of blame that can be pointed to the corner of Jin Sasaki. Where yes, Jin Sasaki was not going to bow down, he was not going to leave himself, he was going to go out on a shield. You can let a fighter do what he wants to do, and that's the right mentality. It's his corner's responsibility to save the fighter, let him live another day, get him back in that ring someday in the future, and rebound. Jin Sasaki was not on the same level as Brian Norman Jr. He was getting destroyed in that fight. He had zero shot at winning that fight. Brian Norman was levels above him, and he was putting a beating on him. If you realize that in your fighter, you need to make the proper adjustments at that point in time and say, you know what? We realize this is not his night. There is levels to this thing, and there's a life outside of boxing. And not only that, there's a longer-term plan for boxing in Jin Sasaki's career. And if you would have recognized that early in the fight, you should have put your fighter in the best situation to not even get in a situation like what happened in round 5. Obviously, gave us a highlight reel KO. Obviously, it's a signature moment for boxing fans. And as a boxing fan, yes, it was exciting. It was crazy to see that situation unfold. But I'm looking at the humans kind of standpoint from this. And that's not okay. The human standpoint, where you look at this from a human side, he's going to have long-term damage. And it could have been prevented. Brian Norman was going to get that win regardless. Yes, it gave Brian Norman that statement signature win. But you got to put a lot of blame on that corner. And the damage that is now done and whatever level we see of Jin Sasaki going forward, that is going to be put on the hands of his corner. If he's not able to return to the same shape or form that he just fought at, if Jin Sasaki is not able to get back to a position of even fighting in the ring again, or if he has long-term damage, that can be put 100% on the blame of his corner. And so they need to evaluate themselves in that standpoint, because there was no business for him even being in that fight in round 5. That's just the brutal, honest truth right there. As I said, though, that's for Jin Sasaki. He showed his warrior mentality, so on and so forth. Now, though, what's going to happen for Brian Norman Jr.? I made a statement on yesterday's show where I said this: 147 is currently a wide open weight class. Lots of moving pieces. Lots of opportunities for the guys to go make a statement. Brian Norman Jr. had the opportunity to go out there and make a massive name for himself and become potentially that next superstar in the welterweight division. And I said that was a possibility of what I could say today on Thursday's show. And I can confidently say now that Brian Norman Jr. took care of business. When you look at the division, it's still a wide open weight class. But Brian Norman Jr., obviously Manny Pacquiao is the biggest star if we're really going to include him. That's that. I don't think he's a legitimate contender. Obviously, I've given my thoughts on Mario Barrios' fight. If we're looking at legitimate guys in the mix right now at welterweight, Brian Norman Jr. has now solidified himself as one of, if not the biggest star in the weight class. Obviously, you have Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, but they're not world champions right now either. Brian Norman Jr. made that statement. And he might just be the best. And I would say pretty much, I'd say, yes, you're probably right. He is the best fighter at 147 as of this point in time. So what is next for Brian Norman Jr.? Well, lots of things could happen. One of which, obviously, he went and called out Boots Ennis. And I'm going to take a second real quickly and give my thoughts on the call out. Here's the exact quote. I'm going to go read it for you guys right now. When Brian Norman Jr. had his KO, got the microphone, this is what he said. And I'll give him props. Stone cold quote, but let's say this: I wish I had a certain fight coming up, but they heard the B. Norman storm coming. And you know what happens when that storm comes? They grab their boots and run. First and foremost, that's a cold quote to say. I'll give him props for that. That quote is cold. But let's get to the facts of that. Brian Norman Jr., all due respect, I do agree with what you did in making the statement to go out there in Japan, grow your brand, take a big bag, and put the statement on Jin Sasaki that you made. I'm not going to go make a big deal about that. I think you made the right decision in that choice right there. But don't be turning the page right now and go act like Boots Ennis now is over here ducking you. That cannot be the sideline we're going to go with right now. That quote's inaccurate. You have to realize this. You had the opportunity. You turned down a $1.75 million deal last year, and his team didn't want to negotiate while he had a fight upcoming when they were willing to offer close to $2 million for that fight to happen in unification with Boots Ennis. There's only one reason that fight did not happen, and that's Brian Norman Jr.'s fault. As I said, I don't fault the man for doing it. I'm not going to throw shots at him. I think looking back at it, he made the right choice. But what I will say is don't try to rewrite history now. I'm not falling for that. Brian Norman Jr. ducked Boots Ennis when it happened, and maybe you could say it was a good business decision, and I do agree with that. But at the end of the day, the man was offered a contract twice from Jerome Boots Ennis. You could have had that unification fight made and done already. So we can't go put the blame on Boots Ennis now that he already moved up to 154. That's not all right. Of course, as a boxing fan, would I absolutely love to see Boots Ennis and Brian Norman Jr. step in that ring with each other? Absolutely. Would that be a massive fight without a shot of a doubt? But Boots Ennis has moved up to 154. That weight cut was brutal last time around. And if I'm Boots Ennis, you made that decision, you're not going to go back in time. That fight can now happen at 154. That's not Boots Ennis' fault. This is going to be on Brian Norman Jr.'s fault for not making that fight happen when he could have. Now, it was the right choice in my opinion, but you can't go out there and throw shots at Boots Ennis at this point in time, acting as if he was ducking you by moving up to 154. He grabbed his boots and ran because nobody else was going to be willing to go out there and fight him. So don't go act like you were trying to go out there and he ducked you. That's an accurate statement. So yes, stone cold quote, but not accurate quote. Can't be going out there throwing shots at Boots Ennis when it was ultimately down to you and your fault and your team's fault. So what could legitimately be next for Brian Norman Jr.? Well, with the Boots Ennis fight likely out of the question now, you could look for a unification fight. Obviously, the Mario Barrios, Manny Pacquiao winners on the table. You could go out there and possibly fight Rolly Romero. Obviously, he has not been promoted to the full world champion right now. He's still the regular champion, but you could do something along those lines with yourself. Ultimately, you also have the upcoming Lewis Crocker-Patty Donovan fight. That rematch, you could fight the winner there in the unification. I don't feel like any of those are realistic, though. My ultimate decision that I feel like is going to come down to will be between a couple of different guys. One, Eko Essuman. I feel like that fight makes a lot of sense. You could get that fight done in the UK or USA. Either way, that'd be a good fight to make. Other fight, Rashidi Ellis will be fighting here in a couple of days. If he goes out there and wins and makes a statement in that fight, you could also see that fight happen and make that fight go down in Atlanta. Homecoming for Brian Norman Jr. That would make a lot of sense as well. So those are the two fights that I see most realistic for Brian Norman Jr. with a unification possibly at the end of the year, early 2026 coming on once the welterweight division kind of figures itself out. Because right now, there's a lot of open pieces right now. We don't have everything figured out. There's a lot of moving pieces in welterweight. So once things settle down a little bit, then you can go pursue those unification fights. That's what I want to say about that fight. Let's go to the co-main event. Sora Tanaka, Takeru Kobata, vacant OPBF welterweight title was on the line. What a fight. That was the definition of a rock'em sock'em type of fight. You had them going down all the way through it to where round 3 was when Tanaka won the fight in a firefight. Round 3 KO. He won the vacant OPBF title. All action. Constantly trading shots. But what I will say is this. It was quite interesting in the stoppage because Tanaka was going after him. He was dominating the first rounds, and you could even say that the third round was also being a domination display as well. But Kobata had his best round in that round when he was stopped. He was finally starting to get some confidence and was exchanging. Now, I will say this, Kobata did not make a protest to the decision. He was okay with it seemed like. So I'm not going to necessarily fault the ref too much. I just felt like it was a little bit premature, and I don't feel like it had to happen at that moment. At the same time, though, Tanaka, what a fight. Both guys were warriors for stepping up in that ring. All action fight. Definition of a rock'em sock'em fight. And for Tanaka, what a fighter. He is somebody that we need to keep an eye on. A very talented fighter. Before that fight happened on the card, Rei Abe fighted Yuya Oku for the Japanese featherweight title. This was also a very good fight where Abe coming out winning 96-94, 97-93, 96-94 on the scorecards. You could see him targeting another world title eliminator type of guy. He is going to be working his way up, and it would not shock me if he is a world champion in the future. Let's go to the first fight that started off the main card, which was for the IBF light flyweight title. You had Simri fighting Christian Arnetta. This was a disappointing fight. Top to bottom, disappointing. Not a fight that I was excited to watch. Not a fight that was entertaining. It felt like this was a situation where Arnetta, I don't know if he would even really wanted to be in that ring last night. It felt like a situation where that man just wanted to go out there and just get through 12 rounds and move on with his life. And what's disappointing about that is this is his second big fight. He fought Sibanachi no Shinga a couple years ago, and he did a very similar game plan. I just don't understand why he's going into the ring trying to fight this way. It's not the way to do business, and he lost himself another big opportunity to the point where I don't know if he's going to get himself back in position for a world title shot again. But the fight as a whole was not very good because Shimri, he won 115, 112, 116, 111 on the scorecard. The other one had 113, 114 for Arnetta. But Shimmery didn't do a lot either. This was a just boring fight where not a lot of changes happened. Shimmy did overcome a third round knockdown, but still, that was the only moment that Arnetta seemed like he did anything. The second half of that fight, especially, was just those two guys standing there, barely throwing any shots. Very long, drawn out fight, not entertaining, disappointing world championship fight. Shimmy won it fight. He rightfully won it, but he barely did anything. Just that he did a little bit more than Arnetta. So what's next for them? Shimmy could unify with Eric Rosa, Rene Santiago, go defend his belt for a little bit. As for Arnetta, I don't know what he's going to do. I genuinely have no clue what Arnetta will do going forward. It makes no sense what he did last night. And I don't see himself getting him back in position to go for a world championship anytime soon. Because he's now done this 2 times. Very disappointing display for him. I'm going to go on a short break. We'll be back in about 2 minutes and we'll get right into some boxing topics right after that. I'll see you guys in just a couple of short minutes. Accusation alert. Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda card will no longer be in an 18 by 18 ring because someone on the card did not want to sign off on it, and it was not Shakur. He willingly signed his part. All right, let's go back a week ago. 1 week ago, we talked about the fact that the ring was going to be moved down to 18 by 18. If we recall, Turkey Al Sheikh made his Tom and Jerry quote about wanting guys to fight and stop running. That essentially seemed to lead to the implementation of the 18 by 18 ring for that card going down, the Shakur Stevenson and William Zepeda card. Now we backtrack a little bit. Supposedly now we're in a situation where the 18 by 18 ring is off the table. We're going back to the standardized ring. Interesting. You look down this card and all reports seem to dictate that Shakur Stevenson was not the one that did this. And I'll be honest real quickly, I know there's a lot of hate for Shakur Stevenson. I've always been someone that appreciates what he brings to boxing. We saw him go out there and we just saw him get the KO against Josh Padley, but apparently people want to forget about that moment. Baffles me. We just saw him not run just a couple months ago. We're already forgetting that. People are going to throw away and say that Josh Padley is not a good fighter. Yeah, Josh Padley also was the guy that upset Mark Chamberlain, just to throw that back out there. So that doesn't shock me. I don't feel like Shakur Stevenson would care what size ring it is. His defense will always be supreme, and he's going to go out there and win the fights. So you look down this card, who could possibly have been the reason for it? Well, I mentioned on the fight card that when this was announced, Hamza Shiraz could have possibly been one of them. I feel like that closing the distance for him was going to be a little bit more difficult when you talk about going against Edgar Berlanga, who wants to exchange in the pocket. But then you look even deeper, and I feel like this is the one that could have been the case. Albert Puello, when he's fighting Cyril Matias. Remember, Matias is a guy who was once one of the most feared men in boxing. That got exposed by quite a bit, but let's look back at it. Matias is a pressure fighter. Matias is a guy that's going to be on the attack the entirety of that fight. While Albert Puello is coming off of a fight in which I personally believe he did not beat Sandor Martin. Albert Puello is a guy that's going to want to get away from the pressure of Matias, and so it seems like that could very easily be the guy. Now, obviously, we don't have details or facts, so I'm not going to go accuse anybody directly of it. But I'm just saying, there's a few guys that could make some sense here. But the moral of the story is there's not going to be an 18-by-18 ring any longer for that card. Unfortunate, in my opinion, but that's the deal. Frank Sanchez, F.A. Ajagba 2 has now been ordered. The IBF has ordered Frank Sanchez to face F.A. Ajagba in a final eliminator for Daniel Dubois' IBF World Heavyweight title. Not a bad fight. F.A. Ajagba should take care of good work there against Frank Sanchez. I don't think that's going to be too competitive a fight. It is a little bit disappointing because I feel like I would have liked to have seen F.A. Ajagba and Martin Bakole fight again. I don't think that fight was a draw. I feel like F.A. Ajagba won that fight, and he should have been given that win. In hindsight, we go back at it. That fight was not very entertaining either, so I get why they're not making that fight. But Frank Sanchez, F.A. Ajagba makes sense. And it's a good opportunity for him because when the fight ends up happening, if you're IBF, the interim champion essentially, or title eliminator, you're going to put yourself in position to fight for a world title. And that would be the best opportunity for F.A. Ajagba. Obviously, the Martin Bakole fight would not be the situation. So this makes a lot of sense. Good matchmaking. Hopefully they get that deal done. It will be interesting to see where they place that fight, though. It might be too early to make it happen, but just throw it out there. The Daniel Dubois and Alexander Usyk Undisputed Heavyweight Championship of the World, July 19th, that fight card is still missing a couple of big fights. It's solid. I know the main event's the main attraction, but it's missing something. This could be the answer there, just to throw that out there. That would be possible. Obviously, this would be a rematch as well. They did fight each other in 2021 when Frank Sanchez won by a unanimous decision, so it would be a decent fight for F.A. Ajagba to go and get his get back in this. All right, let's head over to other fight news that's been coming out now. IBF junior middleweight champion Bakur Murtazaliev is in talks to fight England's third-ranked contender Josh Kelly. The bout could land on September 13th, Canelo Terence Crawford card. This would be huge. I mentioned that this was likely going to be the fight I expected to see have happen last week when there was rumors of Bakur Murtazaliev posting the tweet of September 13th, which is the date of the Canelo Alvarez and Bud Crawford fight. I looked at that and said, you know what? This man's probably onto something. That would be a good co-main event to have. And when you talk about possible opportunities, I know a lot of people say, well, Erickson Lubin just did the title eliminator. Why is he not the guy in position? Well, Bakur already took care of his mandatory a little bit ago. This is a situation where he can do a voluntary defense. And by doing so, he's going to have the opportunity now to go out there and choose who he wants to fight. Some people could say Virgil Ortiz would be a more fun fight. Some people could say other guys. Here's the deal. He's not doing that for one reason or another. I think that's also not the fight that's best tailor-made for Virgil Ortiz. I think he could win that fight, but I still do feel like there's other fights to become world champion that make more sense for Virgil Ortiz. Therefore, Lubin is not the guy I wanted to go with. Josh Kelly is a bigger brand. You bring in the UK fan base into the fight. I feel like that's a good fight to make, and massive props. When Josh Kelly had his big fight, or his not big fight, a couple of weeks ago, I said this. He's got to stop screwing around with these other guys that don't make any sense. Go out there, take care of business against him. But now let's move forward for Josh Kelly. Get yourself a big fight. This would certainly count towards that. So Josh Kelly, Bakur Murtazaliev seems to be possibly on the table for the undercard of Canelo Bud Crawford, and that would be a good fight. I would have Bakur winning that fight at this point in time. But still, a very big step up for Josh Kelly and a great situation in place to put that fight on for the card. Last thing I want to get into on today's show. Joseph Parker has been given the green light to defend his WBO interim heavyweight title against Derek Chisora in a trilogy clash. Not the fight to make. Now, I have said this before. Joseph Parker would be a perfect addition to the Alexander Usyk Daniel Dubois undercard. Perfect. I couldn't think of a better place for that fight to go down on. But Derek Chisora trilogy. Listen, the first two fights were very entertaining. Fun fights. But do we really want to see a trilogy at this point in the time? Joseph Parker would easily win that fight. All due respect to Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker wins that fight with ease. With ease. I don't need to see Chisora go lose 3 times to a man who's clearly better than him. And Joseph Parker is even better than he was when he beat Derek Chisora in the past. This is not the trilogy that we want to go see out there and have happen. Derek Chisora also is at a position where he's going to fight for the 50th time in his career. He deserves to go out on top with a win. I don't feel that's a fight that has any chance against. Yes, he's always entertaining. I love Derek Chisora, and I want to see him fight guys. Just throw some names out there. Why not go out there and fight Deontay Wilder? Why not go out and fight a guy like Dave Allen? There's so many better fights for Derek Chisora than going out there and getting his butt kicked against Joseph Parker. That's not the way to go out if I'm Derek Chisora. And I love Chisora. I feel like he deserves to go out on top or at least be competitive in a fight. And Joseph Parker, Chisora is not a competitive fight whatsoever. At the same time, if you are Joseph Parker, nobody seems to want to fight this guy. Everybody knows that he is probably the 3rd best heavyweight right now if you were to do proper rankings behind Dubois and Usyk. And you can make a very good debate that he could even possibly defeat Usyk or Dubois potentially. He is a legitimate guy that deserves a world title shot. But the problem is that nobody wants to fight him. He should have had his world title shot against Daniel Dubois on February 22nd. That did not come to fruition. So now you're in a position where what's next for him? He has to go fight somebody if he wants to stay active instead of waiting possibly a year until he gets back in that ring. So, yes, if he just needs to get a fight under his belt, go ahead and make that fight. Not a big deal for Joseph Parker's standpoint. Make some good money, get on a big card, and go get an easy win. It just does not make sense for Derek Chisora. There's better fights to make, and that's not the way to go out for Derek Chisora if I were him. That's my personal thoughts on that situation right there. With that being said, though, I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I have a great guest coming on that you guys are not going to want to miss. I'll be promoting who's to be on the show tomorrow afternoon. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of you guys Thursday. May God bless you guys all. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great rest of you guys Thursday. SchuZ out, and God bless you guys. See you guys tomorrow.